Hello, all you cosmic travelers and wanderers. This is Darlene Grift and K. Melissa Waterman, inviting you to join us today in our episode of Expansion from Within, Exploring Multidimensionality.
Let me introduce you to my friend and dear colleague, Darlene Grift. She is a lifetime experiencer, a medical intuitive, and a multidimensional mediator for over 35 years. She's also an author, an artist, a teacher, and a mentor for spiritually invested people.
And K. Melissa Waterman is my friend and colleague, and she's an intuitive mentor, a spiritual teacher. She also works with energy on many levels. In the past, Melissa has worked with Dr. Joe Dispenza on his research team.
Join us on our journey of meeting multidimensional beings, exploring what it means to be human, and expanding our spiritual evolution. Today, we're going to talk about extraordinary experiences, near death, out of body, and we're going to touch on astral projections. Are you ready, Darlene?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us what near-death experiences are?
We hear people have near-death experiences that they're in some way they've been in a trauma, some kind of car accident, or they're on the surgery table, or they're in the hospital, or they're very, very ill in some way. What that is that the body's in a severely compromised position, and it's that choice of life and death. But our spiritual level may not be ready to accept the death experience, or their soul level hasn't completed something and they need to come back. There might be more advantage for them to stay than it is for them to go. That near-death experience is that fine line between leaving your body in some way on the soul level because it's too traumatized for you. Some of them think that they go to the light, or that they see a loved one, or that they are told by their guidance system that they have to come back because they have something to do. But it's always choice. It's never really, you have to go back and there's no choice with it. We're given that choice, even if it's momentarily in that place of decision that it's given to us.
Do you think that this kind of experience has a potential to change us?
I don't know how it couldn't. And with everybody that's on the media that has near-death experiences, they've always reported that they came back different. Whether that was they saw things different, they treated their loved ones better, they rectified past issues, they saw life in a whole different way. Maybe they were very busy people, maybe they were the type A personality, and then they went through this experience, and in some way that changed them to be more conscious, more mindful of their actions, their thoughts. So yes, I think it does. It's the same that when someone takes something that's a psychedelic or whatever, we are getting our brains up on a higher level to observe life differently. It's the same with the near-death experience, is that we get a chance to look at life differently. Some of those people that have a near-death experience may not even believe that there is life after death, but when they can view their body, or they see themselves in a whole different place and they're not in the physical form and they're experiencing something that's in an altered dimension, then they come back with that. That's their reality. Their reality at that point has shifted drastically.
I have thought of it often as an opportunity to become more spiritual, to become more awake, like a little push into there's more. I know that is reported from people who have psychedelic experiences as well, this like awakened spirituality.
Yes.
Have you ever had a near-death experience?
I wouldn't call it a near-death experience, but it was interesting to say the least. I had a neck injury that rendered me paralyzed for 9 days in the hospital. And there's a method that they run up your foot to see if you have any nerve damage or if you have any neurological damage, and mine was opposite. I couldn't move at all. When the situation happened, I was face down into a soft bed, into a water bed when the situation happened. All I could hear was screaming, but it was me. But I didn't know it was me. When one of my kids flipped me over and they took me down on a stretcher into the ambulance. I couldn't hear anything, but all I could see was white wings. What was in my head is, I'll never be able to hug my kids again because I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't do anything. The wings were there. I couldn't hear what anybody was saying to me, but the wings and the essence of love and care, and it wasn't the light, like it wasn't about going to the light, because there was clearly something in my body that was not working, but I wasn't in a desperate place where I was bleeding out or anything. It was more about this space of feeling, oh, there's something else more around me that is loving, that is caring, that is lots of wings. It felt very angelic to me. So that's my closest thing that I have with what I would call not a near death. It's probably more of what we'll get to is like an out of body experience.
Well, let's talk about that next. Tell me about out of body experiences.
So some people have them on a regular basis. It's when you, again, it can be trauma. It can be something, if someone is being attacked, if they're being raped, if they're being molested as a child or whatever, it's that disassociation or out of body experience. Some people, even when they're in surgery, can see themselves on the table, what's happening during that surgery. So it's an out of body experience where you rise above it, sometimes from trauma, and sometimes just because that's what people do at night. They leave their bodies, sometimes on purpose, because they put a protection over their body so that they can come back in, but they leave and they travel.
It sounds like there are two different kinds. One is an out-of-body experience that happens when a person isn't necessarily choosing to leave, but they leave maybe to save themselves. They leave to protect themselves in some way if some harm is coming to the body, the physical body. And then the other is that people are choosing to leave. And is that astral projection?
It can be. If you leave your body and you astral project, you're projecting yourself somewhere.
Right.
So that's to visit somebody, or that's to see something. And it's also part of what we would see as remote viewing, is where you're taking yourself in a different consciousness to go explore something or see what's there or visit someone. For people that are very connected to spirituality, a lot of times they'll astral project at night to see each other if they're in separate places, so that they have a visitation, they have a feeling, a felt sense of that person, or sometimes they can even relate to them and each of them feel each other, even though they're not in physical form. They sense their presence, or they have an interaction, or they have that conversation, but it's not in this dimension.
Does it mean that someone could visit you without your knowledge?
Yes.
And view you?
Yes. Yes, they can. And I was listening to someone, this was many years ago, and I was told to listen to, it was a video of somebody. I got like 5 minutes into it and it became more dark than what I wanted to experience. And I shut it off, and it was about 20 minutes later, I had to leave and I had to go out somewhere. And when I got in the car, I felt the energy of being watched from that experience. It's just really clear of putting a boundary down when that happens. Like, you are not invited. I do not welcome you. You remove yourself from that. Some people are not aware of that. And I would imagine that being observed was for a reason why somebody wanted to observe you, rather than having it random. It feels like there would be an intention there. But when they do the remote viewing, I don't think that those that are being remotely viewed are 100% aware of that, at least not initially. Then you become more aware. They probably have it depends on what you're remote viewing, right?
Well, it sort of gives the whole exploitation of our private space a new meaning, really. I mean, we're worried about drones and we're worried about all the cameras around, but if there's a whole group of people who know how to remote view, we'd have to do some serious protection work around that, I would imagine.
Or awareness. If you're sensitive to it, you would feel it differently. You would feel it as, this doesn't feel really good right now, at the least, or my sense is this. The one thing I want to mention, though, is that some people get very caught up in feeling that they are attacked or psychically, or that they tapped into something that is an entity or whatever. And that can just get perpetuated because it becomes a fear level. And then you start to feel it, see it, believe it is happening all the time when it may not be.
I really think that speaks to the real value of our intention. Our intention is so powerful, and that we can intend protection.
Mhm.
We can intend for good or bad, but I think when we're intending on the positive side, it's quite powerful. It seems like a lot of attention could be paid to our intention around remote viewing. And I think it's a wonderful idea to, be able to go to Spain and see some things when I can't afford the plane ticket, right?
That would be great.
If that's possible, I'm up for it. Do you think there are any dangers to these techniques?
Well, the near-death experience, the danger is you don't come back because your body's too compromised. The out-of-body experience, it feels more neutral to me because it's a choice. It can be a choice or a survival technique if something's happening to the body, to separate and watch, as opposed to be impacted by it, physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually. The remote viewing, I think, that's the one that is there danger to it. I mean, I guess in some cases there is of whatever information that they bring back about something that could be harmful to that person that they are observing. That's always a possibility. And I don't like to use the word danger. It could be at the least harmful if the intention is to do harm.
Can you tell us any tips on how we might learn to use remote viewing?
The remote viewing is tuning in your telepathy in some way. This is how I trained myself in somewhat of doing it and trusting it, is when I was driving and I was going someplace, I would say, let me see what this place looked like 100 years ago, 500 years ago. But there's no attachment to it. There's no attachment to, you're just opening that muscle of understanding that, yes, I'm in this place, but what's ahead of me that I might not be knowing about consciously, or what happened in this place that was this under ice 500 feet? Was there dinosaurs here? Without you thinking about it, what did this place look like 1,000 years ago, where I'm driving through right now? Was there fields? Were there houses? Don't look at judging what you think that it is and how that could be not real, or where did that come from, or I'm making that up. Don't judge it, just allow it. It's stretching the muscle. And then there's psychometry, which is another way to work with that. It's easier to do it with something that the person has worn, like a watch or a ring, something that's metal, something that person has worn for a long period of time, takes their vibration on without you knowing who that is. Like, ask a friend, do you have anything that is, and not theirs, do you have anything from anybody that is metal, a watch, something like that? You come into a meditative state, you hold that, and you see what comes up. It could be a word, it could be a picture. It depends on where your access is. If you're visual, you might get pictures, right? If you're kinesthetic, you might get a felt sense in your body. Body might move into certain, like curl up in a ball, like did that person have a bellyache? What you're getting is the frequency that is on that object. And then write it down and see how accurate it is.
Say the word it was called again?
Psychometry.
Can you say more about the title?
I believe it is the psychic ability. It's the holding of any object that has a relationship to something. It's very connected to when we hold crystals or when we hold a rock, because there's information a lot of times in those objects. That's another way to do psychometry, but there may not be anything to address the accuracy of it because you may not know what's in that. Nobody may know what's in that rock or in that crystal. But when you have something that belongs to somebody, my first time that I tried it was a friend of mine before she passed gave me something. I think it was a ring, and I didn't know who it was from. I saw this little boy and a woman walking alongside a lake. And there was some more things to it. And here it was her husband's mother's ring. So it was both of them in that vision walking on a path that they used to have by their home. I didn't know any of that, but that's kind of like the information that you can get from objects, and it opens the mind. Any of these things are broadening our consciousness.
It's so interesting that we think that inanimate objects don't hold energy. They really do, and that the GDV camera that I work with can actually take images of energy that objects hold. But it's very interesting. It broadened my view of everything to find out that rocks had their own life force energy, that things that we don't normally think of as alive still had a kind of life force energy. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's like, the tree huggers. If you lean against a tree and just take a moment to feel it and listen with a different way, you're not listening with your ears, you're listening with your innate wisdom, right? What does that tree have to tell you? Like, just open to that. Go hug a tree, go sit in the grass and feel the grass. There was a documentary on the sound that grass makes when it's cut, and even before it's cut. There's a woman that I know, her forest behind her house was going to be cut down, and it was a place that she always went into, right? It was always a place that she would navigate with. She would take walks with her dog, and it was very much alive. And about 2 weeks before it was to be cut down, she said there was nothing there. There was like no energy, like the trees pulled back because they knew what was coming. And it's that interconnectedness that we are with everything, that whether we do psychometry or we're holding rocks or we hug a tree or we pet grass, it's that place of bringing that unification and that oneness together to have that opening for ourselves within, so our heart expands and our mind expands.
Right. I think extraordinary experiences include being in nature and having something unusual occur, something out of the ordinary. If you sense a fairy or you are in contact with a plant diva, there's so many possibilities for extraordinary experiences. We've named the big ones, the near death and out of body, but I think we have extraordinary experiences all the time. I think when we talked about visitations, that's an extraordinary experience. We're not used to having a being come in and chat with us, or to be able to see even a being coming out of the corner of our eye and trusting it and really knowing. Because it's extraordinary, we don't validate it necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
And the evolves would say that life as a human is extraordinary, period, to them, because of everything that we are invited to be, and everything, all the choices that we have and all the emotions that we have, and that the governing vessel is really our innate wisdom and how we manage that, navigate that, or even understand that it exists.
Right.
So life is an extraordinary experience, period. Just depends on how you view it. What side of extraordinary are you looking at?
Can we talk about walk-ins today?
Sure.
I know that might be considered a visitation, but it's also an extraordinary experience.
It is. Well, let's take a look at the near-death experience. It can be connected to that. So if you have a near-death experience and you choose not to come back, but your body is somewhat viable, or at least in another soul level's choice, it looks viable, they can enter that with agreement. So some people come back from a near-death experience not being themselves at all, because that soul level and all those experiences for the many years that they've had either coexists with that memory, cellular memory, or there's a whole other individual that comes in that is sharing in a body that experienced. So just think about that. So if you have a walk-in that comes from someplace else that is another soul level that chooses to come in and you say yes, it comes into a physical form that has cellular memory of something very different.
So wait, let's break that down a little bit.
Yes.
So you're saying that a walk-in has come, let's say to me, let's just use me as an example. A being has come and said, hey, Melissa, can I join you in your body? And on some level, I say, yeah. And so whose cells are involved? Is it weird for the walk-in or is it weird for me?
It's both. It's an
Right.
integration process because your physical body, especially if it has happened in trauma, you wake up different because you're not Melissa's soul level anymore. You are someone else's that you have an agreement with, but they're not familiar with your physical body. Your physical body is not familiar with them. It's an integration process.
Wow. I've had instances where people have asked me, because I have an interesting childhood history, they've asked me if I was a walk-in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was puzzled by that question at the time and had no idea whether that was true or not. And somehow they thought because of the trauma history that that I was a walk-in. How would one tell if they were a walk-in? How would one know on this conscious level?
I think that they would feel different as if you say you liked certain kinds of food before the trauma, and then you come back and you don't like that food anymore. You like something else. Like somebody could just override that and go, wow, that was a real change. But even coming back from comas can do that as well, because you might have an experience that you have no consciousness about, but when you come back, you're different. And there's so many different kinds. Sheila Seppi, in her book, I think it is called Walk-ins, gives you different levels of walk-ins, where you have one with the soul body, then you have a blending, then you have an agreement where you're shared, and then there's like 6 of them that she's discovered in her own process of being a walk-in. There's different ways of agreeing, like even as a channeler, for people that channel, before there's an integration process of where you understand and know that being or that consciousness or that group of being, before you really get to blend and understand and integrate with them, you are going to a different space, or they are coming through your body in a way to have a conversation, to share knowledge or wisdom. That's like a blendedness in the moment.
Right.
But you eventually become energetically enmeshed with them the more that you work with them, because that's how it functions, is that the more you bring something in, the more you integrate with it.
Sure. I guess I wonder what the point is. Why do we need to be walked into?
My mother had 2 near-death experiences, and one she became a walk-in. Her appendix ruptured and she was rushed to the hospital, but they wouldn't do anything for her because they couldn't find her father to sign the papers. She had an experience, I think she was 12 or something at the time. She had an experience of a younger girl dressed in older clothes, like at about age 9 or so, sitting on her bed and rolling into her. Then my mother woke up with a sheet pulled over her head and being ushered down the hallway in the hospital to the morgue, because she did, according to them, she passed. That experience for her felt like it made an impact on everything in her life. It wasn't like she was living the life of that 10-year-old, but her whole relationship and becoming a healer, her dynamics of her body on many occasions being very ill and her having to find a way to heal that. It feels like, for me, it feels like it makes sense that in that near-death experience, it gave her the will to live, which she might not have had otherwise.
And it likely served that other being as well.
Yes, and it does. Those agreements just aren't, let me just come, there's an agreement. There's either a purpose the being or the soul level that comes in as a walk-in, they either are bringing something or they have a higher purpose. It's not just to overtake and just, oh, let's see what happens. There's usually something that there's an intention with it.
It's good to hear that the possibilities are with other human form, right? Not just extraterrestrial, because I think that's the thing. People are saying, oh, you're a walk and your head is oddly shaped because maybe you're a reptilian.
No, it doesn't have to be that at all.
I've never heard that before. That's new news to me. It's always been in reference to an off-planet being. And so it's just interesting. It's very curious.
Well, when you think about the discussion that we had before about when you leave and those spirits that get stuck in between and the disincarnates, sometimes that walk-in is like with that experience that I explained about my mother, that 9 or 10-year-old, she could have been stuck there because maybe she was attacked. Maybe she got burned in a fire. Maybe there was something that she didn't have any family in greeting her. So she's been there for 50, 100 years. This is an opportunity, but it's not like being in limbo. It's like, oh, I can help. I can support this life force that is now leaving.
It's symbiotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular, really. So I have a whole bunch of words here I want to talk about. Soul exchange, infusion, overlay, braid, jumper. Tell me, what are these types of experiences in regards to being a walk-in?
Soul exchange would be more of the walk-in or saying, I'm out of here. For me, understanding a soul exchange, if people are viewing it different than a walk-in. Walk-in to me feels like there's a compromise or there's something happening that is traumatic where one soul could leave and another one come in. But a soul exchange feels like it's more conscious. And I believe that it is that place of you'd have to be at a higher vibration to understand how to do that. So that's my take on it. The infusion piece is like we're talking about that integration piece and the overlay. Some of these terms like soul braiding is more about we have soul groups that we come in with. If you are aware of several of your multidimensional timelines, on one timeline you were this or you're that or you're a male or maybe you're not even human. Say there's 3 of them or 4 of them that feel like they are on the same once you've identified them, once you understand their or completed their timelines for them, that they can braid together to be on a mission or a purpose or an intention. It's a consciousness of bringing them all in so that you're more integrated.
What about jumper?
A jumper is like a visitation. If you go to some place, now I've had this experience, which wasn't fun, going to England and going into all the churches and going into the places that they considered under the churches and the dungeons and all of that. There was a lot to be picked up there. And so I would consider them jumpers. It's like a thought form more so than I see it as a soul level. It's more of a thought form that you walk into, or maybe you're open to that you're not aware of. And so there's a bringing in of that energy for a period of time. You may not feel like yourself, or you may talk different, or there's something that it's not an integration. It's kind of like something that passes through. That's how I see as a jumper. And again, it's about being mindful. If you're very sensitive or you're an empath or you're looking into these things with a very open, curious mind, just be very careful of mindfulness in certain ways when you're in places that might have energy around it that is not positive.
Right. And protect yourself.
And protect yourself, yes.
Use your intention and your imagination to do what you can to protect yourself. I like wrapping myself in gauze. It's my favorite.
Like a mummy?
Yeah, I mummy myself.
You mummy yourself. I like that.
No embalming fluid, just the cushion, just a wrap around. And I have nothing else. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I think this is very interesting and thought-provoking for people, that they can take a look. There's much more to the life of a human than we know.
Isn't that the truth? All right, I'd like to make some announcements. The Cosmic Travelers have a live meeting the third Sunday of each month. It's a very interesting session. It's a guided interactive meditation directly with the evolves. To attend this beautiful meeting, contact Darlene through soulunion.com. The fee is $25. Also, the Cosmic Travelers have a Facebook page. Please look for it on Facebook. You can reach Darlene for individual sessions and other information on her website, soulunion.com, and you can reach me at livingwellbeing.net.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And remember, you know more than you know.